February 25th, 2022. Soon after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Joe Biden announced new sanctions against Russia.
Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia.
But not just Biden. Pretty much all of the Western world announced a new economic war on Russia.
They will hit the Russian economy hard.
Waging economic war on Russia on a scale that would have been unimaginable.
These sanctions were supposed to destroy the Russian economy and punish Putin for starting this war. But if you ask the IMF, this didn't go as planned.
And yet this year its economy is set to grow faster than all advanced economies, according to the International Monetary Fund.
If you look at the GDP growth figures, Russia is growing faster than most Western countries. But is that actually true, or are we not looking at the bigger picture? Let's find out. This is the story of the true state of Russia's economy, and if it's reached its breaking point. Post-sanctions Russia. In April 2024, the IMF predicted the Russian economy would grow at an annual rate of 3.2% in 2024. By the end of the year, the expectations were exceeded, and the Russian economy grew by a staggering 3.8%. While this may be lesser than the growth rates of India, China, and Indonesia, it's much higher than the growth rates of several Western countries, such as the US, which stood at 2.8%, or the UK, which stood at 0.9%. Looking at GDP figures alone, it may appear that Russia's economy is remarkably resilient, just like the IMF says. But is it actually doing that good? We and many experts do not think so. To analyze why, we'll need to understand how a war economy works. In 2023, Russia spent 16.6% of its total government spending on the military. Doing that doesn't make your GDP figures go bad immediately. Russia isn't spending only on fighter jets and tanks, it's also spending on sign-up bonuses for new volunteers who join the army, construction in territories hit by war, mortgage subsidies for war veterans, and a lot more. All of them are unproductive assets, so even if GDP figures rise today, they're eventually going to fall down. The IMF recognizes this too, and if we look at their prediction of Russian economic growth in coming years, it is expected to fall from 3.8% in 2024 to 1.4% in 2025 and 1.2% in 2026. In contrast, the UK and US's GDP is expected to increase, proving for the time being it's essentially going to come down because that's how the war economy works. But the good thing is, Russia does have huge oil and gas reserves. Their oil and gas production has always been their major source of income. Even today, Russia is selling a lot of them. The only difference is that the main importer of Russian oil and gas is not the EU anymore. Instead, it's China and India. So, are Russia's oil reserves saving the Russian economy? Well, no. Let's understand that. But before, if you enjoy learning more about today's economic stories, be sure to subscribe. Russia's oil and gas exports. Before the war started and sanctions were imposed, Russia was the largest natural gas exporter on the planet. However, its oil and gas exports dropped significantly soon after the war started. You might think that Russia could be selling gas to some other countries like India or China. However, unlike oil products, you cannot export natural gas in containers or tankers. You need pipelines to carry the gas. And almost all of the gas pipelines Russia has built in the past connect Russia with Europe and not China, or any of its other ally nations in Asia. One can argue that Russia can always install new pipelines that they can then use to sell their gas to China. But why would Russia be interested in spending on that? After all, it would take several years to build a pipeline, and we don't know what the situation would be like then. Maybe the war and sanctions won't last that long, and Russia will be selling its gas to the EU without any sanctions like it once used to. The lack of oil exporting infrastructure becomes more evident when we look at buyers of Russian gas in 2025. Even today, Russia sells more gas to the EU than to anyone else, and I don't need to explain how little it is compared to pre-war levels. Okay, so Russia can't sell gas to its friends, but what about oil? Especially crude oil. That they can sell. Yes, Russia can sell oil to other countries, and that's what they've been doing.
Well, Russia has redirected its oil exports from Europe to India and China.
Today, India and China are among the largest importers of Russian fossil fuel exports. These two collectively import 2/3 of Russia's net fossil fuel exports. In February of 2025, China imported fossil fuels worth $5.4 billion, whereas India imported fossil fuels worth $3.83 billion from Russia. China houses the largest population on Earth and is a global manufacturing hub, so it's understandable why they need that much oil. But why India? Do they really need that much oil? I understand they do have a large population, but their industry isn't yet big enough to be importing 30% of Russia's oil exports. Well, Russia isn't just selling to India. In fact, it's selling its crude oil to Europe. Okay, so Russia has found a way to circumvent the sanctions, and its exports are now increasing and not decreasing. But is this true? No, not really. Russia's oil and gas reserves in June 2024 indeed increased on a year-on-year basis, but that's only because they hit rock bottom in July 2023. And let's be real, India isn't buying Russia's oil because of their friendship or close ties. It's only buying because of the discount that Russia's offering. Would Russia be offering this discount if it weren't for sanctions? No. So this means Russia is selling more oil for less price. And while these sanctions are boosting the Indian economy, they're only helping Russia's war-torn economy survive a bit longer. So Russia's large oil and gas reserves are not going to work anymore. But what about their not-so-large population? Can Russia turn into one of the consumer market economies? Let's find out in the next section. Russia's consumer market. Different countries have different sources of income, but to earn money they need to sell what they own. Some sell it to other nations, and some economies operate more through private consumption countries.
What I can say is that private consumption remains as the anchor of growth for the economy.
Russians might not be as rich as the population of some Western countries, but they're still wealthy enough to keep the Russian economy afloat. So can that work for Russia? Well, Russia's private consumption accounted for more than 50% of its nominal GDP in 2024, so it won't be wrong to say there's been an increase in Russian private consumption, which for some time will help the economy. But that isn't going to last for very long either. Let's understand why. Russia is experiencing hyperinflation, and it's getting worse. In February 2025, the inflation rate reached 10%. This means the value of the Russian ruble on 1st of March 2025 was 10% lower than it was on February 1st, and is expected to get even worse from here on. Knowing this, if someone has some amount of Russian rubles in their bank account, what do you think they'll do? 1. Save them, 2. Invest them, or 3. Spend them. No one's going for the first option with that much inflation, so we're left with 2 other options. Investing might seem like a good option, but only if that is a safe investment and a monthly return of 10% or more. However, in a war-torn economy, there is no business with the 10% ROI, and there certainly is no safe investment. So people are going to spend it, providing temporary relief to the economy and long-term bankruptcy to the people unless they have very well-paying jobs. Well, you have to give Russia that. Its minimum wage has been increasing rapidly since the start of the war, and the unemployment rate is as low as 2%. So how is Russia creating that many jobs for its people? The answer is that it's not. The number of opportunities is only getting limited, however. Because of war, many young people are being conscripted into the army, and some of them will lose their lives there. Many others are leaving the country as soon as they get an opportunity to do so. Because of this, the Russian workforce is getting so small that the remaining jobs have become high-paying. This may be a temporary relief, but in the long term, Russia is losing its most important asset, skilled young people that were going to be Russia's future. To sum it up, even if GDP growth figures tell you that Russia is able to fight Western sanctions, it is not. Starting a war comes with a cost, and Russia is paying the cost of starting this war. It will keep paying the cost even after the war is over, and some damages might be irreparable. Maybe in the future Russia will be able to find a way to overcome those damages, but until then...
The efficiency of the sanctions is a long-lasting efficiency, but do not underestimate the impact of sanctions against the economy of Russia.
Before we end this video, let us know what you think about the future of Russia's economy. Do you think Russia will ever be able to overcome what it has lost in the war, or will the damages be even worse than what we're imagining right now? Share with us your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned. See you in the next video.